Good morning. Welcome to the start of another week in Connections Bible Study. It's time for a little coffee and Jesus.
The Connections Bible Study is based on the Revised Common Lectionary and is followed by millions of Christians worldwide. Today we'll be reading the Gospel passage, which is Monday.
Yes.
Sorry, it's
You can hold up.
Monday, August 7th.
So today's Gospel passage is Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. And as we're reading along, be sure to jot down any notes you have, anything that jumps out at you, anything that really speaks to you. And while you're at it, we'd love for you to include those thoughts and ideas in the comments. And as well as any prayer requests you might have, go ahead and put those in there too. And we will not ignore those. So, you want me to read both today?
No,
She's a little short of breath right now. It's her asthma.
No, I think I can. Let's see, 22. It closed for some reason.
Yeah, 22 to 31, 33.
We are literally picking up right where we left off last week.
Jesus had just fed the 5,000 after going out to be in a solitary place, and the crowds followed him. He's just finished feeding them, and we're picking up right there.
I'm reading from the Passion Translation. I'll try to change it up a little later. But as soon as the people were fed, Jesus told his disciples to get into their boat and to go to the other side of the lake while he stayed behind to dismiss the people. After the crowds dispersed, Jesus went up into the hills to pray, and as night fell, he was there praying alone. But the disciples, who were now in the middle of the lake, ran into trouble, for their boat was tossed about by the high winds and heavy seas. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, or during the fourth watch of the night, between 3 and 6 a.m., Jesus came to them, walking on the waves. When the disciples saw him walking on top of the water, they were terrified and screamed, "A ghost!" Then Jesus said, "Be brave and don't be afraid. I am here." Peter shouted, "Lord, if it's really you, then have me join you on the water." "Come and join me," Jesus replied. So Peter stepped out onto the water and began to walk toward Jesus. But when he realized how high the waves were, he became frightened and started to sink. "Save me, Lord," he cried out. Jesus immediately stretched out his hand and lifted him up and said, "What little faith you have! Why would you let doubt win?" Then the very moment they both stepped onto the boat, the raging wind ceased. Then all the disciples bowed down before him and worshipped Jesus. They said in adoration, "You are truly the Son of God."
Okay. I'm going to read the New International Version, and it titles this section, Jesus Walks on the Water. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, why did you doubt?" And when they climbed in the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Okay, so Just one little, I guess, contextual thing to add I did find earlier tonight. So John, and I think maybe Mark also tell this story, but one thing that John saw that they saw as important is that the people, right after he fed the 5,000, the people began to get excited about Jesus being the coming Messiah and the King, and that's kind of why he was immediately sent the disciples away and dismissed the crowd and went off on his own. It just like getting away from Herod because it wasn't his time. It wasn't his time for the crowds to be proclaiming him as Messiah. So that's kind of why he did this. Matthew doesn't tell us, but John does. So what did you pull out of this today? What jumped out at you?
A few things, but while we were reading, I noticed the NIV is my favorite on this one. The 31, ye of little faith.
Verse 31?
Yeah. Oh, I guess it doesn't say ye.
It says you of little faith, yeah. But yeah.
Why did you doubt? And I like how the Passion Translation actually takes it a step further. Why would you let doubt win?
Why would you let doubt win? Yeah, I picked that up while you were reading that. I like that. Why would you let doubt win?
Because that's what it is. It's when you don't have faith, it's you're allowing doubt to win.
And the Amplified, there's a little expansion on 31. It says, or why did you allow yourself to be drawn in two directions? That's another way to put it. Yeah.
Or one more. Why did you take your eyes off Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
I can say that anytime we mess up.
Yeah.
Why did we take our eyes off Jesus? I noted once again that Jesus goes off to be alone anytime.
That is something very important you see quite often, is getting that alone time with God.
Well, I think
it's just like Jacob last week.
We see it so often, but it's important to take note each time because he does it all the time, and we should too.
Yeah.
And so I don't ever want to become used to the fact that he does it.
Yeah. And usually it was in a place that would be, like when he goes into the garden to pray, or he goes up on the mountain to pray, it's going to be a place that's quiet, no distractions, and then here we go from Jesus praying alone without the distractions. He's done sent the disciples, the crowds, everything away. We go from that to Peter getting distracted in his faith.
Mm-hmm. With Jesus right in front of him. I have, obviously I'm struggling a little bit today, so I'll probably come up with more as you're talking. But the disciples were scared by what should have been impossible. But nothing is impossible to God. And as long as we have faith, we can do all the things that God sets before us. And then I noted that even the wind obeys. This is actually a verse that I like to use with the boys when they're scared of the storm. It's like, you don't need to be scared of the storm, because who controls the storms? And it always helps them a little bit. They're still young, distracted by fear, but
I don't want to get too deep into this, but maybe somebody else does. When you say if you have faith, I think one thing this story shows is if you have a little faith, you can still get through it. It doesn't take that absolute faith. And that's kind of where I got into it with my notes. I'll just repeat what I wrote, but Peter's step out into the water very much mirrors our own steps or leaps of faith today. It's easy to start out feeling good, knowing God can handle the path he laid out before us. But the first sign of trouble, we get distracted by little things, we exaggerate the danger in our minds, and we begin to doubt. Jesus will see us through even if our faith wavers, or even if we have that little faith. But it would be so much easier on us if we stayed focused on Jesus. But I don't. It's we don't like to put measures of things like sin and this and that, but it's very easy to measure faith. We whether we think it's possible, we think God can do it, we think God might do it, we know God's going to do it. We're focused on Him. We've got that great faith. In this story too, and that kind of points to where we focus on maybe ourselves, but a lot of that person's faith. We always focus on the fact that Peter sank. Well, what about the faith he had to step off of that boat? Because I can swim, but it would take Jesus standing out on the water for, if I heard a voice that said, "Hey, step out on the water," well, we're going to be wrestling for a little bit first. But because I wouldn't just step out on the boat, step out of the boat right into the water.
But you didn't you didn't just witness all these
exactly,
miracles,
yeah, not being there. And that's what I said. It would take Jesus standing right there for me to step off of the boat right into the water.
It would take Jesus standing there for me to get in the boat.
You're afraid of boats. But that's something that we rarely ever focus on when we read this story, is the amount of faith he started with. That was some strong faith. And yes, he doubted as he got further on, but he got distracted and made mountains out of molehills. The wind wasn't going to affect him, but once it caught his eye, once it distracted him, he starts exaggerating, how dangerous that is. Well, is God going to see me through this?
Is it the wind or the fact that he was on water, though?
Well, we already know he's scared for his life because of the wind, but all the different passages, they do tell us he was doubting because of the wind. When he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Okay. Yeah, he doubted. He began to doubt. He let that wind.
I realized how high the waves were. Okay.
He let that wind get into his mind and distract him from the fact that he should have stayed focused on Jesus.
I let my fear of water get in there, and I think, he realized he was standing on the water. Because that's where I would be. But your notes reminded me of my journey. Because when God called me into the ministry, I didn't question it. I jumped head first. And what?
I was just going to say, as I was writing this, I was thinking of many times in our life that...
Yeah, this is one because I'm so much closer now. Because, with COVID and how difficult it got there with the boys having to do e-learning, and I didn't have time to study with them here, and it just... I don't know how many times I prayed, "Are you sure this is what you have for me? Are you sure? Is this, did I misunderstand?" And
that's where you're starting to get that distraction. Your faith is starting to waver. And, you see now God's going to pull you through it. But it might have been a bit easier if you'd stayed focused on it. And there's...
But now, since I've gone past that trial, now I see God putting people in my life to reassure that, yes, this is what I want you to do. And like new professor, like Dr. Kip.
Yeah.
I meet him at the end of my schooling, and he's already made a huge impact. At the end, I really could have used Dr. Kip at the beginning. But it's been... That's just immediately what went through my mind. And here I've got I'm finishing up my internship and 3 more courses.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years after 25, oh, good Lord, how long ago did 25 years after I graduated high school, I'm finally getting
Wow,
a
you're
degree.
old.
Yeah, so are you.
Mm-hmm.
It happens.
Yeah.
Did you have?
All right. No, I mean that was really the only thing I mean, a vast majority of this passage is this right here, from where Peter steps out to where God gets in, or where Jesus gets him back on the boat. Other than that, just the two little things up top, why he sent everybody away, and the fact that he got alone to pray. I mean,
We also have to.
that,
I mean, you talked about Peter's leap of faith. He didn't question where to go when he found himself in trouble.
yeah,
He didn't try to figure it out on his own. It was immediately, "Save me, Lord."
yeah, realized.
Yeah.
And we often do that too. I mean, we're on a path God set for us. We're all gung ho. And then there's squirrels and there's birds and maybe there's a coyote comes out in front of that path, or whatever it is, it starts distracting us, and we start getting down. And there's a tendency, I think, with a lot of people to even start out that as blaming God. You put me on this path, now I'm not going to make it. And then it quickly turns to, God save me again.
Like Pastor Neil called them flare prayers.
Flare prayers, yeah. Shooting up that flare.
Oh.
But yeah, I don't really have anything else from this.
One thing on the Passion Translation I thought was kind of interesting, 1429, where it has, he says, "Come and join me," on the Passion Translation. And there's a little note with another translation, "or go for it."
Go for it.
I kind of like that. But I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Were you looking up something? Or?
No, I just jumped to John. If you want to read John's account of this, it is in John chapter 6, starting with verse 15. I just jumped there to see if there was anything else about the story to talk about, but it does start out that Jesus knew that the crowd were going to come and take him by force and make him king, so he withdrew himself to the mountainside. So
I was just thinking also a ghost. They saw Jesus and were terrified that he was a ghost. We can't forget about all the superstitions and
yeah,
all the different things they had then. And I mean, they're still, I say then, but we still have them.
mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, they had to have been legitimately terrified. Because, I mean, this is something that should be impossible. People don't walk on water.
And I wonder if any of the stronger of the group started to wonder if they were hallucinating, because they just went through, the wind, and actually Jesus didn't calm the wind till he got to the boat. Right. So the boat, the boat is still rocking. There's fear for their lives, and all of a sudden they see a guy standing out there on the water. Yeah, your first thought's probably not going to be, "Hey, that's Jesus." Like, no, it's a ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're already going through trauma.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what you think. Your thoughts or comments down below. And
yeah, we'd love to hear them.
Can you pray today?
Father, we come to you today in the name of Jesus. We thank you for this time that we've had together, and to share and to learn more, and open our eyes about our own walks of faith as we compare ourselves to the passages you've laid before us today. Lord, we ask you to lay your hands on Melinda and her breathing problem. Bring her some healing and relief in that. I ask that you be with each and every one of those who watch us today. And just lead them and guide them in the ways you know how, and help remind them to stay focused on you. And just be with all of us, including me. I don't often pray for myself, but Lord, you know. And we just ask all these things in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Are you gonna be okay?
Yeah.
Are you done talking? Okay. So tomorrow will be August the 8th, Tuesday. On Tuesdays we get into our New Testament passage. If you'd like to write that down real quick. I'll remind you of it here and again, but she's writing it down. It's Romans chapter 10. Romans chapter 10, verses 5 through 15. So that's where we'll be heading tomorrow. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, information, prayer requests, anything that you don't necessarily want to make public yourself, you can always email us, ministry.alh@gmail.com. One of these mornings I'll wake up, not stutter so much over it. So if there's nothing else, well, we hope to see you tomorrow in Romans chapter 10. We thank you. We love you all. Have a blessed day. We'll see you then.